Okay, folks, we're going to get started here, and I'm pleased to introduce Tom Hoffman. He's from WSDA. He's going to talk to us about education and technical assistance with regards to the 2017 requirements. So join us, have a seat, and welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And as far as what I'm going to be addressing today is something that may have, well, it will have a very large impact on most industries in this state, certainly including the small berry industry. But before I do begin, Chris Bennett, thank you for allowing me to be a part of the program this year and also to the planning committee. And even though that Chris, Henry, and the planning committee are the individuals who organize and make this happen, it's actually the individuals who bring this conference to life are individuals like you in the audience. So thank you for taking time to be a part of this afternoon. And again, I also express my gratitude to CHS for sponsoring this session. As what was indicated, my name is Tom Hoffman. I am stationed actually out of Moses Lake, but I also do maintain an office in Yakima. And even though my primary responsibilities in the past have been with chemigation, fertigation, soil fumigation, that was expanded here in July, where now I also coordinate statewide the farm worker education program. And that's the very thing I'm going to be talking about here today. And as I do go through my presentation, that if there are questions, and particularly from Prosser, and thank you, Daryl, for that introduction, that please speak up and your questions will be relayed, hopefully, to Daryl. But again, as I go through the presentation, there are three or actually four primary topics I will be addressing. First is just to provide a history of the worker protection standard. Really, what is it? Where did it come from? What is it intended to do? Looking at the 2015 provisions, and those provisions were significant. Thankfully, in this state, it's not going to impact us here as much as it is going to be in other states for a reason that I'll get into. What has changed and what didn't. The implementation time frame, and actually most of those provisions do take effect actually in a month. And then are the WSDA training programs that we have coordinated to help individuals comply with it. So again, as I had indicated, if you do have a question, please ask. There is a lot of material over here on the side on the table that we have made available. Please take time to look through it. Most of the information, at least our training schedule, is going to be made available on our website, and it's a farm worker education website on the WSDA webpage. And that address you see here on the bottom is on a handout. So don't try to frantically copy that down. Just simply go over to the table and pick up one of the handouts, and that has it on it. I was told that our training schedule for 2017 is going to be posted today. It's probably not going to happen today, but it will be tomorrow. What am I talking about? It's this particular document that lists the different types of training programs that we do have. The train-the-trainer program is one that I think a lot of people are going to be looking at for the mere fact that training as of January 1 has to occur annually. In the past, it was once every 5 years. There's going to be, I think, a frantic effort on the part of people to make certain that they do have individuals on staff who have been trained to actually provide this training. And we have already conducted one workshop that actually was full. And then in addition to that, we do have handlers training as well as recertification workshops as well. We are actually working with the Farm Bureau, and we are going to have a handler's hands-on training somewhere here in Linden, and that's going to be scheduled in March. And so if you are interested in sending staff to that to learn more about the worker protection standard, please keep that in mind and keep checking our website. In addition to that, the principal document that really lays out what those changes are the EPA How to Comply manual. And again, this particular manual is available off of the EPA website as a download as a PDF. The address, again, is over on a table. And I do have some limited copies with me. So for those of you who are interested in actually having a copy, just come up to the podium and I will provide you with one. Prosser, I'm sorry. The other thing that we have put together has been a checklist, and this is a very comprehensive checklist that is intended to be used by growers, but also agrochemical companies to ensure that they are compliant with the 2017-2018 provisions. This is also over on the table. And as you look across some of these, you're going to see some strange references. And what that reference is actually in a final federal rule. If you do pick up that final federal rule, which is also available online, and if you want more information, you just go to that particular section and you can read more on it. But as a 4-page document, if you go through it, you can just check it and see, do I actually have this? Is this something that still I need to be addressing? The other thing is, as far as any other information, there is another document on the table that does offer a comparison from the previous standard to what the current standard is. And it does a very good job of just assessing what has changed from the pre-15 to the 2015. Now, really, why am I up here talking about the worker protection standard? What role and what function does the Department of Agriculture have in it? Well, I think we all realize that the Department of Agriculture was granted primacy by EPA, who enforces the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act through a memorandum of understanding where we actually are the state lead agency in enforcing pesticide use in this state. Now, underneath FIFRA, that is the federal law in which pesticides are registered under. In addition to that, the Washington State Department of Agriculture has granted state authority through the state legislature through these two RCWs, Revised Code of Washington state laws. The first one is the Washington Pesticide Control Act, and that's the act that primarily deals with pesticide application. The second one is why a lot of you are here in this session, and that is dealing with licensing. Now, as far as what the charge is underneath state law is clearly laid out in section 150 of the RCW 1558. It is our authority, it is our responsibility statutorily to ensure that pesticides are not used unlawfully by any individual that may result in either bodily harm or environmental contamination. In other words, those pesticides have to be used according to label directions. What our intent is to ensure that we don't have catastrophic events like this one. So if we do have them, okay, we must have a lot of flamingo lovers. Okay, well, I didn't go off as well as I had thought, but anyway, if this does happen, expect to see us. We'll come knocking. Now, as far as worker protection standard, in working with growers, and I do ag use inspections as well as the other things that I do, that last year, actually even this summer, that I had many growers indicate that, Tom, I have read through that label 2 or 3 times. Nowhere on that label do I see any restrictions concerning early entry. I do not see contamination supplies requirements or requirements concerning pesticide training. And I told them, you did read it, it's there. And well, it was, but they didn't see it, and there's a reason why. Where on a pesticide label do you think that that provision appears? Okay, it's actually in the agriculture use requirements block. And if we look at the Mustang Max, where that is that you go to the second page, and right here in the agricultural use requirement box, there it is. This product must be used in accordance with 40 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 170. What is that? That is the worker protection standard. And if you read down further, there is the requirement. It contains the requirements for training, decontamination, notification, and emergency assistance. What this is referred to is requirement by reference. Increasingly, we are seeing more labels doing this. And what that means is that you get a portion of the label that will indicate that there has to be some type of a setback, a buffer zone from surface bodies of water. What they are going to do is send you to an NRCS website, and you have to download a publication that's going to tell you what those requirements are. And we also see this is regarding even chemigation, that there is a provision in which you are going to have to leave a label, go to another source and read additional information. And this is increasingly going to be so when we start seeing the requirements being placed into law concerning the Endangered Species Act. So please be aware of this. Now, really, what is the relationship between a pesticide label and a worker protection standard? The label actually specifies what the requirements are. These are the things that need to be done. The worker protection standard actually indicates what needs to be done. How is it going to be achieved? Now, if we put all the worker protection standard requirements onto the label, that label is going to go from 8 pages to 150. So what it is doing is making you aware of the fact that these requirements are there. Now you need to be aware of another federal law concerning what those criteria are and what your obligations are as an employer to make certain that your workers are protected. In the case of the reentry interval, what the WPS does is indicate how that notification of workers needs to be done. Is that posting? Is that oral notification? When does it need to be done and for how long? What PPE must be worn is indicated on the label, but then the WPS gets into further requirements concerning how that training needs to be provided, when it needs to be provided, and what needs to be content of that training. So that's the relationship of the two. Now, that ends the background, and we're getting now actually into the WPS, and hopefully this isn't reminiscent of this procedure that some of you may have gone through. We'll know at the end of the presentation. But as far as what the worker protection standard is, really it is not new. The worker protection standard actually has been around for quite a while. The initial rule was passed in 1974. That is a time frame among all federal legislation in which a lot of worker protection, but primarily environmental safety federal legislation was passed. The Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Drinking Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Worker Protection Standard, all in that time frame. So really what is it intended to do? Well, initially it wasn't, they realized that the initial rule did fall short in a lot of aspects, particularly so in a protection of handlers. In what handler is versus worker, we'll get into a little bit. That rule was revised in 1992, and there soon thereafter that they realized that there was other issues that needed to be addressed, primarily bystanders. For those of you who use soil fumigants, you are very acutely aware of this. The soil fumigation labels, for those of you who do not know, went from 8 pages to some cases 75 pages long. And a lot of that has to deal with bystander protection. But really what the intent is of the worker protection standard with the 2015 provisions is to align occupational protections for agricultural employees with other industries that are also covered by OSHA underneath the Occupational Safety and Health Act. What they're trying to do is bring these two agriculture industry into line with other industries underneath OSHA. The other thing is to reduce the occupational pesticide exposure and the incidences of related illnesses among workers and handlers covered by the rule. And then the other thing that is different about the 2015 provisions for the first time is that now bystanders, vulnerable group, particularly individuals of low income, but also of minority, that typically in the past have been those groups that tended to have or suffered from more exposure than others. So again, that is the first time where individuals other than employees and workers and handlers have been brought into it. So does the worker protection standard apply to everyone? Well, actually, the standard does apply to farms, forests, plant nurseries, and greenhouses, but providing that you are in the production of agricultural plants, and if that business hires agricultural workers and handlers, and if you use pesticides. That is the criteria. Are you one of those five groups? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's 5. And if you actually produce agricultural plants, and if you do hire individuals, and if you use pesticides. So what happens in the event that if you do not? Well, the WPS does not apply to products that are used on non-crop areas. So if you're using pesticides on rangeland, ranch, as far as pastures, even around buildings or roadsides, rights of way, and in those cases, it does not. So what ends up happening is that you can have a label that actually can be used in both sites. So if you're using gramoxamone in a production setting, WPS applies. But if you're using it and then say treating weeds along rights of way, it does not. But please be aware of something, in that even though you may be exempt from WPS, you are not exempt, and a requirement still is in place that you have to comply with the hazard communication standard. Now, that's a standard underneath OSHA that's enforced in the state by Labor and Industries. And what that standard does require, and we'll talk about it a little later, that if any employees are going to be exposed to chemical materials that are deemed to be hazardous, and most are anymore, that they do have to be trained through pesticide safety, that a hazard communication plan has to have been developed and made available to them, and that SDSs need to be available. And in the case of gramoxanone, they also have a non-agricultural block that may also have certain requirements regarding entry, re-entry periods, and also PPE requirements. So please be aware of that. Well, as far as what is an agricultural worker, and these terms are strictly defined, and a lot of times people use them interchangeably, and actually EPA does have specific definitions for both. An agricultural worker is actually any individual who's involved in the production of that agricultural commodity, and they do it for hire. So in this case, if you're actually paying them monetarily through a wage or salary, and if they're involved in production of an agricultural crop, they are deemed to be an agricultural worker. This is a very simple definition, is that basically anybody, again, involved in producing that crop, but nowhere in this do you see the fact that they are going to be using or applying a pesticide. Now, on the other side, we have the pesticide handler. Now, that individual is a person who uses a pesticide from the time that that seal is broken on that container until that product is either used or disposed of. That individual is a pesticide handler, doing everything from acting as a flagger to disposing of materials, even performing a task as a crop advisor. And by definition, a pesticide handler also includes a licensed individual. So if you are a certified applicator, you do fall underneath the definition of a pesticide handler. Now, as far as who is an agriculture employer, I kind of alluded to this a little bit ago. If you hire, you contract for the services of employees, and if you pay that employee or contractor a wages salary, and if they perform activities in the production of that crop, you are deemed to be an agricultural handler, but it does not end there. If you have some type of supervisory responsibility, you may also be deemed as an individual who is responsible to make certain that the employees that you are responsible for are aptly trained and equipped. This is another way of looking at it. In addition to the agricultural employer, the first bullet here, and it also applies to chemical pesticide establishment employers. What are these? These are the CHSs, the Wilbur Ellis's, the individuals like that. Or if you have some type of supervisory responsibility. So in this case, it's anybody who supervises workers or handlers, including a licensed applicator, the owner of that property, or a commercial applicator. A case in point. This happened a while back where I was doing some inspections. I came across the field in which a product was being applied that was not posted. I not only cited the commercial operator, I cited the commercial applicator as well as the grower. This is what that means. Okay, all of those individuals were responsible. The other thing is that because the FIFRA violations are not associated, actually it should be the WPS violations, they're not associated with pesticide misuse. Labor contractors are no longer governed by WPS. So what does that mean? Is that if an individual comes in as a labor contractor and has provided employees, and if those employees have been determined to be deficient in their training, no action can be taken against that contractor underneath EPA. However, there may be the possibility, it just depends on how Labor and Industries writes their rule, because in Washington state, the worker protection standard is co-enforced by 2 state agencies, the only piece of legislation in the state that is. Labor and Industries and the Department of Agriculture. They may, in the process of right now of writing rule, may hold the contractor responsible if they are not adequately trained. So what does that mean? This is a rather busy slide, but really what I want to get to is down on bottom, that what this is indicating is that if you have a labor contractor, which I think a lot of you may do, a lot of labor contractors are doing their own training for the handlers and workers that they're bringing onto their property. So if you train it on one property and they take these employees to another property, do you, as the agriculture employer who is paying that contractor to have those employees there, going to have to retrain those individuals? So you can see where that can get pretty complicated. Well, the answer is really no. As long as some type of documentation can be given to you from that contractor to indicate that that training has been done. However, this is where I'm getting back to what I mentioned earlier about the hazard communication standard. You are nonetheless responsible to make certain that you are telling those individuals where the location is of the pesticide safety information, the pesticide application specific information, and hazard information, specifically the SDS, safety data sheet, and where the decontamination supplies. So at the very least, you're going to have to do these 3. Okay, as far as what is the goals of the standard, well, the goals, again, as I had indicated earlier, is really to align the protections underneath the OSHA enforced Occupational Safety Health Act with other industries. The other process is to make certain that it was easier to understand, and believe me, there were things about WPS, even with the current 2015 provisions, that we're still struggling with. But really what the intent is to improve protective measures and to reduce acute pesticide exposures among primarily workers and handlers, but now, as I had indicated earlier, by bystanders, specifically vulnerable groups. So really that's what the goal is. Now you ask yourself why. Well, this is the bane of at least my job. And this is, if I can get it to play, is, I guess it's not going to play, but what it is actually, it is an air blast sprayer that, that was actually photographed, and actually was a video, but you can see what's happening here with this plume. And when I'm seeing air blast sprayers here, the only comment I'm going to make is that it's a full-time job for me and my staff just to deal with the issues with this piece of equipment in the basin, in the Yakima River Basin. Misuse is extraordinary. So again, if you decide to use this particular piece of equipment, learn how to use it correctly. And I'm sorry that the video didn't play, it did earlier. As far as the WPS is that the requirement, again, is not only the agricultural employer, but also of others to ensure that proper measures have been taken to ensure that the employees have had the proper training, have been given the proper equipment, and they have been properly trained in it. I don't know how many times when I do my ag use inspections, and I am asking the employees whether or not they have received the training, and a lot of times the response is, what is WPS? It's worse than when I talk to the employer and ask them whether or not they have been WPS trained, and they look at me and ask, what is WPS? But the mere fact is that training has been a requirement since 1974. And the requirements under that training have been expanded quite greatly. But really what the intent is here again is really threefold. And these are the 3 principles underneath the WPS. One is to ensure that your employees have been informed about pesticide safety. It's to protect them from pesticide exposure. And then if something does happen, that there's proper measures that have been put into effect to ensure that we have minimized the potential acute harm resulting from it. Those are the three principles. We'll discuss each one of those here. As far as informing, that deals with, again, the expanded safety training. It has gone from 11 elements for the workers to 23. For the handlers, it's gone from 13 to 36. Far as of hazard information, that's primarily your SDS, but also your pesticide specific information. It is not the pesticide application record. This is something different. And then the notification, has it occurred and when, and then has the appropriate exchange occurred. Last year, I think the most common complaint that I have gotten was from commercial operators working for commercial applicators, again, the CHSs, that came to me and complained about the fact that they were told to go in and check on a field, not have been told that the grower had treated it the day before or even that morning. And they're coming out ill. Legally, growers are supposed to notify the ag chemical supply companies if there has been a treatment and if an REI is in effect. There's also REIs, personal protection equipment. Now this deals specifically with protection of those employees or now bystanders, and something that we'll get into here a little bit if we have time, and that's the suspension of applications that are now being required. Some of these are 2018, but we will review what they are. Mitigating exposure, what can you do to minimize the injury that may occur should a pesticide exposure take place? And that's everything from the emergency body wash, eye wash, to ensuring that individuals are taken to a facility that's able to render some type of care if a pesticide exposure has been occurred. One thing that I have happened, actually on more than one occasion this past year, that you'll see down here on the bottom is a part of the safety poster where you have to indicate where the facility is that you need to take an individual. It has to have a telephone number and an address. I will ask the owner, or I'll ask the worker or the handler, give me directions to the facility. I think out of the 12 inspections I did, there was only one person that could. Do you see a problem? I hope you do. If I'm down and I'm relying on my colleague to get me to emergency care and they have no idea where the hospital or the care facility is, you think we have a problem. In one case, they had a PO box. Okay, a little bit about the implementation time frame. As I had indicated, it was put into effect in 2015. 2016 was intended as a transition year, and during that year, full compliance was expected from EPA concerning the pre-2015 rules. Starting January 2nd, most of those rules will come into play. Some of those will be deferred until January 1 of 2018. And what those are, we'll get into, but those deal primarily with the training, as well as the suspension of applications if you have people in an area that should not be there. My biggest issue are hunters. I don't know about you. Those and horse riders. I know they think that do not enter means feel free to ride. And, but anyway, as far as pesticide safety training, as I had indicated in the past, it was every 5 years. Starting January, it does need to occur every year. As I indicated, the basic training topics have essentially doubled, if not tripled. And again, those will take effect in 2018. EPA is working with Oregon State University and the University of California, Davis, and putting the training materials together. And again, as far as the training, when it is done, there is now mandatory record keeping. We'll look at that. And that does need to be retained from 2 years from the time that that training occurs. And it does have to be provided. It has to be produced in the event that if somebody does ask for it. What that training does indicate as far as when it occurred, who actually did the training, what the qualifications are, the type of materials you used. In this case, it was a worker training, when it occurred, the location, the names of the individuals, and then their signatures. This is just additional optional information. And again, this training requirement is a 2018, but again, the mere fact is that training now does need to be documented, and it does need to be kept for 2 years. Now, what isn't involved in that training? You can see it is a slew of information. And this is just an indication of what those items are. The blue dots were the pre-2015. The orange dots are those that are now current underneath the rule. So you can see it's quite extensive. And this information is over here on the table. So feel free to pick it up. And this is for the pesticide handlers. So it has to have everything for the agricultural workers, and then this is on top of it. So again, the training criteria has been expanded dramatically. Now the reason why is that we keep having problems. And as I had showed, if that video would have worked, that misapplications is still rampant. And air blast sprayers, I was told by Gwen earlier that if they're used correctly, they work fine. I have yet to see when it's used correctly. But anyway, be aware of that. The other thing is that as far as the WPS training is that there's still documents that are available. The WPS training on this one by EPA is also over here. Again, that is something that's still valid for this year and also 2017, but that will need to change in 2018. The one thing is about the WPS for the EPA release is nice is that they also have a study manual, which is also over there that has pre and post tests, as well as a brief description on what those modules are. But regardless what you use, there is one thing that you have to be very careful of, is that each of these that have to be approved by EPA. And on the back of all these is that there's going to be a statement that says that EPA has reviewed this video and has been determined to be compliant with the WPS standard. If that is not there, don't use it. All right, because we will ask what you did use. The other thing that is critical about it is that there is also now training requirements. And the other one I didn't show here is the one that's available still yet from the University of Idaho. That does have it both in English and Spanish, and so does the EPA one, and it does have it for workers and handlers. The other thing is that a licensed applicator or an individual who has completed the worker, as far as the train-the-trainer program, has to be present at the time of training. What I call the plug and run will not cut it. In other words, you sit people down, you plug in a video, and you walk off. You have to be there during the training. You do need to stop that training periodically and ask questions. That's where that EPA study manual that comes with their video is nice. It has to be done in an environment that is conducive to training. In other words, you're not sitting them down in a shop. That does happen on occasion with the welder and the air hammer going in the background. It has to be done in a manner in which they understand, in this case, the language. And again, those materials do need to be EP approved. There is another one that was released recently that WSU is actually involved in helping create, and it's pesticide safety for agricultural workers. Now, this is only workers, not handlers. This can be downloaded from YouTube. Otherwise, I do have some copies up here if you are interested. So again, as far as the training, I don't know if any of you have gone through the worker protection standard train-to-trainer training, which gives you essentially a master trainer. But if you have in the past, that is no longer valid. Underneath these new guidelines, EPA has indicated is that they have to be retrained in some form. So what we did is that we made a proposal to EPA that if you are train-to-trainer trained and to bring you up to speed with the updated requirements, what we will do is that we'll run you through a retraining. And what that's going to be is essentially maybe a day. The other thing that's different is that in the past, if you're a pesticide handler trained as one, you can no longer train workers. The only way you can train a worker is if you have attended and you have successfully completed a train-to-trainer program. I know this is a lot of detail, but like I said, there's a lot of changes. The other thing as far as the safety poster is that you're going to see changes here regarding where it needs to be. The safety poster, I'll show a little bit what that is, but now it has to be at a central location. If you have a permanent mixed load site, it needs to be there. Or if you have an area where you have 11 or more workers or handlers, it needs to be posted there as well. There is a change in what is in that poster. Now you have to have a directive telling individuals that if they think they have been exposed, that they must seek medical attention. The other thing is that you have to list a pesticide regulatory contact. Who that's going to be yet, we don't know. But in this case, if somebody feels that a pesticide has been misused, that they do have a contact now that someone can call. So in the past, what was typically used was this EPA safety poster. That has essentially gone away. We're hoping that EPA is going to replace it. The information where you see the X directing individuals to the state rule or law is going away. But the mere fact is that a lot of the information is going to be the same. But the fact that I mentioned earlier, certain changes will be made. One, that the instructions have to indicate that the employee does need to seek medical attention if they feel that they have been exposed. And believe me, I have heard some horror stories when I have done inspections and you asking why people haven't left the site after they have been exposed. The other thing is that as far as a name and address, a phone number, a pesticide regulatory agency in the event that they want to report some type of misuse. And again, this one, both of these actually are 2018 requirements, but beware of the fact that it is happening. Now, does it have to be a poster? No, it does not. Matter of fact, oh, and then the other thing here is that if there's any changes to information, it has to be updated within 24 hours of knowing. And again, it takes effect in 2018. So as far as the pesticide safety contact information, it does not need to be a poster, even though that is a very convenient way of doing it. What you can just simply do is bullet these items on a list and put that up on a poster as well, up on your central posting area. And again, it has to be in a language that they do understand. So again, it can be just bulleted list. And it must be, again, conveyed in a manner they understand. And like, as I mentioned earlier, that if there is any change, particularly so to the emergency contact or to medical facility, that has to be updated within 24 hours. The other thing that is currently a requirement is the pesticide specific information and also the SDSs that need to be made available. Does it have to be in a printed form? No. A lot of people are just setting up a computer station and then on their desktop, a link to, if it's CDMS, Blue Book, Green Book, or Ag Green or something else where people can actually get on and read something if they so choose to. Now, as far as this form, it is also over on the table. This is the pesticide specific information that does need to be provided. And it just goes through the type of information that needs to be reported. If you are on LandDB or if you're on Agrian, this is actually qualifies those two types of programs. I'm sure there are others for this. So all you have to do with that is just down print the pesticide use report and you can post that. And again, that's referred to as the hazard communication information. As I indicated, as growers, if you do apply a pesticide, you are obligated to make certain that you let your commercial, your agrochemical company know that you did. Because if they have one of their crop advisors come into the field not knowing that you have treated, they have to be made aware of it. So you do have to notify them. So it is a dual responsibility. It does work both ways. It has been that way even the prior 2015 changes. And again, as far as the SDSs, as part of that hazard communication information, and really what the function of that communication standard is that to make certain that if individuals are dealing with hazardous chemicals, that they do have information concerning what those chemicals are and what needs to be done in the event that something happens. And just a very quick review is that we are looking at the application specific information as well as the SDSs. So that is something that as far as the application specific information, SDSs just needs to be at a central site. But when it comes to the safety information, that safety poster, again, you have those sites I had indicated earlier. As far as a permanent mixed load site, you have an area where you have more than 11 workers or employees. It needs to be there as well. And the thing is about the application specific information and the SDSs, they do need to be retained for 2 years from the end of the REI. So again, there's a lot of requirements. The other thing is about the safety data sheets. They used to be referred to as the MSDSs. That has changed underneath the Hazard Communication Standard. All these standards now have 16 sections to them. And as far as the training, you as agriculture employers had to have trained all your employees as of June of this year regarding what those SDSs and the sections are. Here's kind of a standard hazard communication program. We don't have this requirement, LNI does. LNI again enforces the hazard communication standard underneath OSHA. So it does not matter what product that you go to, every SDS now, if you want to find something about accidental releases, you go to section 6. And every product with an SDS, that's where you're going to find that information. That was not true in the past. And here is the one for Fusilade. And what you see down here on the bottom underneath hazardous symbols are 3 symbols. Well, really, what do they mean? They're pictograms. And it's an effort to advise a user what those possible threats are. There are 9 of them. There are both environmental as well as human health as well as chemical. This one here of the starburst in the chest, what do you think that means? Okay, that was a question, I'm sorry. It wasn't rhetorical. You know, what does it mean? What do you think it means? Okay, so one would think that, right? Well, it's not. What that means is it's a carcinogen, and or it attacks specific organs of the body. The one that's actually respiratory is this one here with the exclamation mark. It's an irritant, both with skin as well as respiratory. This one here should be self-evident. What is that indication of? Poison. Okay, you guys in the back on your cell phones. Okay, we want you to start engaging. Is that okay? All right, thank you. So the fact is that if you do go to these safety data sheets, this is the information you're going to find, and it's consistent with all of them. The fact is that one problem that we have run into is that with the SDS is that sometimes that information is contrary to the label. We have one case here for Fusilade that it stipulates that you need to have a vapor organic cartridge with an RP or HE filter. The problem is that if you go to the label, anywhere on the label do you see that requirement, yes or no? Do you see any requirement for an organic vapor cartridge on the label? No, what it does require is protective eyewear. So in this case, which one takes precedent? Should you use the SDS or the label? Okay, thank you. You're absolutely right. The label always takes precedent. And unfortunately, those 2 individuals last fall who got cited because the company that they went to get their PPE used the SDS to determine what they needed for respiratory protection. And what was on the SDS was different than the label. So again, be aware of that fact. The other thing is as far as field posting, what has changed here is that if the REIs are longer than 48 hours, you have to post the field in addition to an oral notification. And what we mean by posting is a WPS sign. Okay, quick review. Beginning in January 2016, how frequently, oh, that should be 2017. Okay, error. How frequently must training occur? Back row, how frequently must it occur? I covered it. Okay, all right, Daryl. Okay, well, we'll have the other guys answer the next one. Okay, how long must documentation of the training be kept? All right, thank you. From when? Ah, caught you. It was from the time that the training occurred. All right, who is responsible for complying with the WPS? Owners, employers of researchers who are growing crops for commercial purposes, or employers at commercial facilities like CHS? Which one? Okay, they're all right. Yes, every one of them. Yes, thank you. All right, an area is considered a treated area for, I'm sorry? Yeah, there you go. There you go. Everything above C. I heard that. And again, Prosser, chime in. As far as the area is considered a treated area for 30 days following the end of an REI, even if the REI is 0 hours. And we do have products that have no REI. However, is that re-entry interval still 30 days? Say it, you're right. Yes, yes it is. Where must a pesticide information display be posted? Okay, someone said it, all of the above. Yes, that's true. Please be aware of that fact. That will change. How long must the hazard communication information be kept? How many years in general? I just give you the answer. 2, but from what time period? After the application, after the end of the REI? It's actually C, from the end of that REI. All right, some other things that we're looking at is the agriculture exclusion zone. I don't know how that's going to impact you guys here, but I'm going to cover it very, very quickly. And what it is that it is an area around that application in which individuals who are not trained or properly equipped cannot be within. And it's actually based on the particle size, the droplet size, and a type of application. In this case, if you're using aircraft or an air blast sprayer, or if that droplet size is smaller than 294 microns, or is applied as a fumigant, smoke, or mist, it has to be 100 feet. It's 25 feet if it's not above, and if that height is greater than 12 inches from the planted medium. What that means is soil. And if that droplet size is greater than 294, or then you have some that are just none. In other words, you're applying a coarse material, you're banding it, your soil fumigation, your drip irrigating, things like that. So again, those requirements are in place. And this is just, I needed to get something besides a biplane here, maybe a turbo thrush to cover this area a little faster. But what this is showing is that as that aircraft is going across the field, that area that's been treated now has become a restricted entry interval. So in that case, only people who are trained as handlers and properly equipped can be in there. Workers cannot. That aircraft has a spray area surrounding that boom, and in this case, it's 100 feet around it, in which if individuals are in it, they have to leave, that again are not trained or equipped. In this case, we have a plane that's applying. They come up to individuals in a neighboring field who are actually maybe out there pruning raspberries or whatever, picking blueberries. You need to suspend that application, and either those individuals have to leave or an evaluation has to be made on whether or not you can proceed safely. In this case, they agreed to leave, so now you can continue with your application. Okay, this is what is referred to as suspending that application. Now on the other side of this, let's say that if you have individuals who are in that field and they do not agree to leave, and again, it doesn't matter if this is an air blast, an aircraft, or a ground rig, that what you need to do then is make a decision, can you proceed safely? And if you look at the situation, the wind is blowing away from them, and you feel through best professional judgment that you can proceed safely, you go ahead and do it. But please, please document this. My greatest problem no longer is with growers and urban individuals living out in the country trying to enjoy that life. You'll never guess, well, maybe you can, the two groups that I have the greatest problems with now concerning pesticide applications is which ones? Growers against growers. We now have incompatible production practices going on. What's happening right now in a basin, traditional potato, wheat, hay, now all of a sudden we're having tree fruits dropped right in the middle of it. For those of you who remember the Badger Canyon days, it's a repeat of that. We're seeing that same thing happening now in the Kittitas Valley. Incompatible agricultural production going on. Growers are now complaining about growers. So anyway, things happen. Again, as far as respirator training, it must occur annually, nothing new. Has to be fit tested, nothing new. The other thing is that you now have to keep a record of that evaluation as far as when that fit test and training occurred. It must be kept for 2 years. The other thing is, as far as the decontamination supplies, there's been no change on this. The soap, single-use towels, that to clean a set of clothes, that could be cloth coveralls, Tyvek suit, whatever that needs to be made available. The other thing is that this is the one contentious part of this that we still do not understand, is that how much water is actually being required, if that is an individual out there as an early entry worker, as a handler. But the one thing that we are consistent about is that if that label does require protective eyewear, that has not changed. And what that is, we'll get into it. In this case with Vendex, if you go to the label and you bring up the personal protection equipment provision, there it is. You require protective eyewear. So what does that mean? Is that first off, you have to make certain that they are provided with protective eyewear. And what you don't want are ones like this that have the vents in it, it has inadequate protection. In this case, they have what is referred to as a tortuous route or indirect route, as what these two are. So again, those would certainly qualify. Otherwise, what people are opting to do is just go with face shields. The one that I wear is actually down here in bottom. It offers some fantastic protection. Or the other option is just go with a full face mask. So again, when they're requiring protective eyewear, that's what they are talking about. The other thing that you will need to have is immediately accessible 1 pint of water to make certain that you can flush out your eyes in the event that you are exposed. The intent is to immediately get rid of that material. For those of you who heard my presentation last year, there's 3 parts of the body that take in far as the product most rapidly, and eyes are one of those 3. So again, it has to be made readily available. And again, the other thing that is required, in addition to an immediate wash, you need something that's going to continue that emergency wash, and it's something like this. It does not have to be this particular device, but in many areas where you do not have running water, this will suffice as a device. But it has to have this criteria. It has to be able to deliver 0.4 gallons for a minimum of 15 minutes. Therefore, it has to have at least 6 gallons. It has to start when you pull it down or start it, and it has to continue operating until you physically shut it off. It has to irrigate both eyes simultaneously. A lot of times we are seeing this at the sites where here's that eye wash, here's some additional wash, and sometimes they just have a small poly and hooked up to a marine battery, and here they actually have a hand shower. And then in this Tupperware, they have the change of clothes, disposable towels, and soap. So again, a lot of different ways to approach it. You see a lot of this in orchards that meets that requirement. This is a device we see a lot in fields where they have a shower. It does not have to be a shower. They have opted to do it. They have an 80-gallon here. It's run off of a solar panel to a battery and electric pump. So in this case, they're washing his hands, and here they actually have the emergency eye wash. A lot of different ways to ensure it. And when they come up with these type of systems, because you just don't have access to running water. So mandatory field posting must occur when the REI exceeds what time frame? Okay, remember I was talking about if the labels now require mandatory posting, if that REI exceeds how long? D, 48 hours, you're right. If I could give you credits, I would. What must be provided when a label requires eye protection? Which one of these? All 3. What is the employer responsible for doing? All of them plus some more. What must be posted at the safety information display? And I'll give you a guess, it's not all of them. There are 2 items that have to be at that safety information display. Remember, at a permanent mixed load site where you take off your PPE and where you have more than 11 workers. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, actually it's B and C. No, no. Yeah, it's, gosh. Okay, I'm going to be embarrassed here. Data sheet due to exposure prevent. It's E and F actually. No, it's not. Okay, never mind. It's a bad slide. We're going to move on. I need to correct it. The other thing is that now the minimum age, except those who are immediate family members, is 18. I know in the past we had a lot of people out there much younger. Immediate family members are exempt from a lot of the provisions. And again, I'm going to just go through the rest of these. The information is over here. The information at the pesticide application and SDS display must be what? Posted no later than 24 hours after the end of the application, remain 30 days after, kept for 2 years from the REI. Which one of those? Are they all true or all false? I gave it away. They're all true. Okay, what items must be provided to the medical personnel if you need to take someone in? It's going to be C and B, your SDS and the application specific information. So again, if you want us to work with you, please let us know. Give us a call. My phone number is over there on a business card. We are going to have a training here in March on a lot of these topics with the Farm Bureau. So just please stay tuned. And again, if you have questions, just please give me a call. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, Carol.
Farm Bureau requires all their members that want to be on the retro program to go through their safety program. They probably do not go in as deep as what you end up doing. But what I find is that when you put on a training program, a lot of the time it doesn't get up here to Whatcom County, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. In the past, you're right. We don't get over to the west side that often. This year, we have made an effort to get up here, and that's the reason why we're going to be here in March.
You could probably, I don't know if you can have the Farm Bureau do it, because they do it in all locales for their retro.
And the thing is, the training we get into, the very point that you brought up, we get in a lot more detail. The other thing is, please understand, this is WPS. I know that a lot of times Global Gap or the other schemes, and that's what they are called, will have additional requirements, or with LNI will have theirs. We don't look at that.
You probably already answered this, but if you're using like bio materials for organic crops, does all of the safety training come under that program?
If there is an REI, yes. And actually, to answer your question, well, if it's a pesticide, yes. Yeah, it's clear, Daryl. If it's listed as a pesticide and registered as one, it comes underneath WPS. You bet.
Hey, thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Last session will be in 15 minutes.
If you want to just break down